the symptoms, I mean, they're literally just so normal. Like they could literally be anything.
Right.
Your period to literally a bladder infection to just like stress, you know what I mean? It could be anything, and there is no test. So even now, like I literally, like, I have a diagnosis of PTSD, like, because of this. Like, I am hyper aware of any and everything that goes on with my body. But it just sucks though, because I'm like, oh, I'm just bloated, and they're like, well, that could be, and I'm like, no, I don't think you understand. Like, and then I have to, like, you know what I mean, like, explain all of this. But yeah, it's hard. It's really hard.
When I was diagnosed, my oncologist made the referral. And so, and when he made the referral, I was like, well, let me go and get some other opinions, you know? And so I started doing some research, and I went to an herbalist and talked to her. And then my third opinion was he's got to be at least almost 80. Well, he may be like 85 now. But he was in a little town in Oklahoma, and he was still practicing OBGYN. And I sent all of the information over. He walked in. His first statement was, do you want to die before you turn 41? He didn't say, hey, I'm Dr. So-and-so. How are you doing? Da, da, da. He just said, do you want to die before you turn 41? And I said, no, I didn't even sit down yet. And I said, well, no, I do not. And he said, well, I've looked through all of your information. And he has my file. He said, I looked through all of your information, and I don't know if you are familiar with ovarian cancer, but it works very fast. The reason they want you to go and see a doctor right now is because we don't know what stage you're in. And so the longer you wait, you never know what could possibly happen, what stage you'd be, and if it could have spread, because I just had that surgery that I told you about in December. And then that's when he talked about the spillage. Mm-hmm. You know, you've had some spillage, and so we don't know what all has happened. So, and he said, the doctor that you have, I trained her over 30 years ago, Dr. Lisa Landrum. Mm-hmm. And I said, oh, okay. And I think that pretty much told me, because I believe in confirmations, that pretty much told me, like, hey, you need to go and get this set up with the doctor. Mm-hmm. Even though you're scared, just go and see what the treatment team is going to say. What's your plan? Ask lots of questions, write things down, you know, because you have so many things in your mind, and you're not for sure what to ask. But it is very overwhelming. But and that's why I always say, when I talk about advocacy, you may be okay with that first doctor, but if you feel like, hey, let me just go see what someone else says, just to give your body or your mind reassurance, you know? And so I was happy to go to, and I'll say, Stevenson Cancer Center, because since then I've been in love with them, and I'll do so many things with them as well. But it took me a while to get there, is what I mean. So I think with this journey, any cancer journey, we really have to just be sure that we know what we want to do, you know, because it's our treatment, not their treatment. So you got to be, and even with chemo, I mean, chemo has its own side effects and things that we're still experiencing years and years later that nobody really thinks about. Mm-hmm. So what about you? What did you have to experience?
I would say, initially, I felt like I was jolted into the whole process of talking about treatment. And what was so disheartening was, because I was so young at 33, my oncologist did all that he could to try to preserve my fertility. So initially, I had an oophorectomy where they only removed my left ovary because, again, he wanted to preserve my fertility as best as he could, knowing that I wanted to one day have children, possibly. But like you mentioned with the spillage, later on the pathology report revealed that the masses I had they were deemed synchronous. And so then I had to move forward with a full hysterectomy. So that was just again, numbing. That's the only word I could use to describe it. And I tell people all the time, and I know it may sound strange, but I dealt with the infertility piece before the cancer because I knew if I took it on as a whole, I would just have given up, most likely. It was just too much to take on as a whole. So I kind of fragmented it in that way. And because so many things I felt were taken from me with the diagnosis, motherhood, I didn't want that to be my story, a part of my story, like not being able to be a mother in that way. And so that was how I dealt with it. And then once I kind of was able to wrap my head around, okay, I need to move forward with this, knowing that I was going to have to go into treatment. So it was just so many layers that people don't understand because everyone's story is different. Everyone's experience is different. So that's just how I dealt with it, and just trying to give myself grace along the way was easier said than done. I think, like you mentioned earlier, about the boundaries was key, and letting those around me know, family and friends, in a way that was as warm as I could be at that time. Just letting them know this is not a good day for me, or I love you, I appreciate your support, but right now I'm going to turn my phone off because this is overwhelming. The text messages, with everyone just said, well, we just want to check in. I'm just like, I need my space. I need my time to process all of these layers, as I mentioned. And they were very respectful. So that helped to make, to soften the blow in a sense, just by me maintaining those boundaries. And I would say being, not feeling guilty about that, just kind of, that helped me a lot. About your experience?
So I think for me, like, I mean, it was just traumatic, but I didn't know that that's what it was until like years later. So like literally I was like diagnosed on a Tuesday. I had my surgery like that following week. And then like within a few weeks I started chemo. And at that time, my chemo treatment was like 1 week in the hospital, like doing chemo, 2 weeks or 3 weeks off. So like 3 weeks I'm in high school, like trying to be as normal as possible. And then, for this 1 week, not only do I have this cancer I've never heard of and I'm so confused about, but I also had childhood cancer. So I'm also on the pediatric unit seeing other like literal babies like going through this. And if I sit long enough and think about it, like I will still become overwhelmed with this deep, deep sorrow, like hearing like the screams of these children, seeing like my parents cry. I think I also just struggled because like my parents were like on the brink of divorce, and anybody knows like childhood illness. I mean, it just is awful for any marriage. So at that time too, I'm like watching my parents like kind of trying to like hold it together, although it was very obvious that they weren't. My brother was in North Carolina in college at the time, and he was really like the only person in my family that I really felt like I could just like talk to about it, but he was gone. And this is like in 2006. So, cell phone, like it just was different, you know what I mean, as far as technology. I had an oncologist who I felt like hated me. He was extremely mean. He was very callous. Now that I'm an adult and I'm able to kind of better conceptualize it, to some degree, like it makes sense. Like he saw me as like a cadaver, like, and he's like, this is what we need to do. Like, and there was no room for me to be a child. There was no room for my parents to mourn. There was no room for that. And, to your herbalist like perspective, I can understand like the aggressive kind of nature in it. But if not for my nurses and like their bedside manner and stuff like that, I mean, like this doctor was awful. Like if I probably wouldn't get sued, I'd say he was awful. Like I don't know for the life of me, like why he was in peds, like of all, like he was awful. And so it was just hard. I mean, it was hard going to school, like losing my hair in high school. At the time that I was going through treatment, I was obsessed with Grey's Anatomy at the time. And literally there was a 16-year-old named Camille who was dying of ovarian cancer at the time of my treatment. And so, I mean, I got bullied like crazy, especially as soon as I started losing my hair. Like my house got egged. Like people just were not nice. And I couldn't do anything about it. I had this port. I'm sick. I can't fight or anything. You know what I mean? Like I can't do anything. And I just felt, I mean, just very, very powerless. I developed like what I now know is major depressive disorder. So then it also kind of shifted from like, do I actually want to survive this? Like, if this is what life is, can I really do this? And really, like, do I want to? And for a very long time, I didn't. And so my survival has also been met with years of remorse and regret. And I think almost like this fake facade of like, I'm so happy I'm here, but that has not been my experience. Like I'm 18 years cancer free, but since my treatments, like I developed endometriosis, I developed fibroid, I developed all these painful things. And it was almost like because it wasn't cancer, then I had doctors who also were like, well, it's not cancer. Like you can handle this. Like we're just going to put you on this birth control, or we're just going to pump you with all of these like narcotics. And it was just a lot. And so like, I feel like my survival, like most Black women, I think, period, in the world, it comes at a cost. And I don't know if we talk about the cost enough. And I think that's where I feel really alone, because I think like within the cancer community, no one talks about it because we're just supposed to be happy to be here. And I'm like, yeah, like kind of, but like this wasn't easy. Like this literally tipped my parents' marriage over. Like it literally made me extremely suicidal for years. Again, developing a PTSD diagnosis, having to figure out like if I want kids or not, going into menopause, all the things, you know, like with that, I literally have like the body and like the sex drive of like an 8-year-old, like all these things that like no one wants to talk about. And I am that person where I'm like, I'm just going to say the thing. But then I'm like in the rooms, everybody's just like looking at me like I'm crazy. So I don't know. I feel like my survival, like probably honestly within like the last 5 years, I've been like happy to be alive, specifically happy to have survived this specific cancer. But I mean, it's taking like 13, 14 years to get there because it's hard. It's very, very hard.
I don't even know where to start. I think one of the things that sticks out in my mind goes back to what you were saying about figuring out the piece about being able to have children or not, right? With my initial diagnosis, they took one ovary. And then, let's see, that was 2021. And then my cancer came back. I had a reoccurrence last August. Yeah, I had surgery August of 2023. And, excuse me, building up to it, because I think both of you, maybe all of you, talked about the scans and how the scans for me were inconclusive for the most part through and through. They're like, we can see something, but we can't tell what it is. So we need to go in for surgery. And so building up to it, my GYN oncologist said, well, we don't know if it's going to be a little bit of cancer or really, really bad. And so we had to have a little bit of the discussion, like prepare yourself mentally. And I went back and forth for weeks, trying to figure out like, what do I really want? How do I feel about this? And so for the hospital that I go to, they have the app where you can communicate with your healthcare team. And I told them, I finally sent my doctor a message. I said, look, I think I have a whole lot of life to live. And if it comes down to it, like life or death type situation, and you have to do a hysterectomy, do it. But you know, in my heart of hearts, I don't really want it. And so we talk about the support piece. One of my really good friends from college and her husband live in the same city that I do. And so I had talks with them beforehand about, we're going to have this surgery. I don't know what's going to happen. And, you know, having to have conversations about what if I don't make it out of this surgery? And even now it's jarring. It's like, so at that time I was 41. I'm like, I'm 41. This is crazy. And like for the first few months after the surgery, that's all I kept saying. Like, this is crazy. And I think the best way for me, I should have said this earlier, is shock. It was just shock. And I tried to do everything to find as much information about what can I expect. I went on Facebook and looked for groups, and I would ask people all the time, okay, what should I expect? If you had to do this all over again from the beginning, what would you do differently? Those types of questions to get insight. So then when I had the surgery last August, I woke up and found out that I had the hysterectomy. And my really good friend was really sad that she had to help make that call, because I told her and her husband beforehand, like, if it comes down to it, and the surgeon, we were in for maybe 15, 20 minutes, and he came back out and he said, she has cancer everywhere. And so we were in surgery for, I want to say 6 to 7 hours. It was crazy. Like, my poor body. But like, those are things you don't necessarily know about. People didn't give and I didn't know how much chemo was gonna hurt. Like the pain associated, the physical pain. I'm like, man, there's layers to this thing. I didn't want to let myself get too low in my mindset and my mood, because I was afraid if I get too low, I won't be able to pull myself back up.
In the next episode, we'll explore how these women found strength and support in the face of adversity.